Hi there, and welcome back to Voices and Votes. With the election of a new chairman for the 13th Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, China's top political advisory body embarks on its new duties for the coming 5 years. Members from social sectors, including those of non-communist parties, individuals of no party, and representatives of religions and ethnic minority groups, will now return home to begin fulfilling their obligations in their various fields of work. How will the newly elected leadership in the CPPCC affect daily life in China? How should we view the political consultation system in the new era? And what are the detailed observations from the Great Hall of the People? To discuss the workings of the CPPCC and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by my colleagues, CGTN reporters Han Peng and Wu Guoxun in the first part of our program. And in the second part, when we come back, we'll be joined by Victor Gao Zhikai, Vice President of the China Center of Globalization, and Michele Geraci, Head of the China Program at the Global Policy Institute. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Hey, Guoshu and Han Peng, you are the envy of thousands of Chinese reporters because you have been working in the forefront. You are expected to give us a first-hand account about what you saw, what you went through today. Now, the 13th CPPCC has concluded today. I'd like to have your first-hand account about what has impressed you most about this event.
The biggest impression for me is, of course, the election of the new leadership of the CPPCC. This new chairman, Mr. Wang Yang, is a very senior politician in China. Well, he's currently the vice premier of China, but before that he was the CPC's General Secretary in Chongqing and also Guangdong Province, which is the forefront of China's reform and opening up. And actually, he also led the Poverty Alleviation Office of the State Council. I have some close, not contact, but I got him close in kind of interview while I was reporting the National People's Congress bi-monthly session last year. He was sitting there with a lineup of government officials and ministers and facing off NPC deputies who were questioning them about their work in the past years. And mainly the last year. My biggest impression is this Vice Premier is so down to earth. He is really telling the truth. He's so frank. He doesn't like
he's
shun.
a man of credibility?
I feel he's so close to people. He's so easygoing. So from his experiences in poverty alleviation and environment protection, I think when he becomes the chairman of the CPPCC, which is supposed to get close to the people, he can really bring the problems there and encourage the members to go deep down to the people and hear their opinions.
And I heard he's left some homework for the
yes,
members,
he was using this word homework because there is an amendment to the CPPCC charter announced this morning. There is a special part talking about the responsibility of the CPPCC members. He's telling them that you should bring the right proposal, the right opinion.
High quality one.
Yeah, high quality. I'm giving you this homework and go back and bring.
Wait a minute. I think there is a strong understatement for his proposal that you guys should go home and bring back quality proposals. Because we have the strong feeling that most of the members of the CPPCC are actually celebrities, stars from different professions. They are symbolic guys, but does it mean that these guys don't take their membership of the CPPCC very seriously, and therefore Mr. Wang Yang has been upset?
No, it's not about, I don't think it's because he's being upset, but when we look at the figures of the proposals being submitted and being passed, 80% of them are adopted by the CPPCC, but there also means over 1,000 of them this year have been dropped, which means they're not powerful enough, constructive enough. So they are urging the CPPCC members, you come with your proposals, this is your homework. You have to make it you have to go down to the grassroots to do the service and bring us the best solutions of the problem.
Okay, let's look at the most important thing. The most important thing this year for the Lianghui, I'm afraid, is the Constitution Amendment. Han Peng, you've been covering this NPC session. What can you tell us about the something? I mean, I'm not talking about something off the record, but give us a first-hand account about how reporters, Chinese and foreign alike, were discussing this issue of a Constitution Amendment.
Yeah, talking about constitutional amendment, I think the biggest problem with the Western way of reporting is that they are having a too narrow scope on how to cover this great change in China. What most of the Western media are only focused on one thing, that is the two-term limit. But actually, if you look at it, there are 21 changes in the Constitution this year, and 11 of them are actually about supervision, building up the supervisory commission and establishing the supervision law, which is about making the anti-corruption campaign more institutionalized. And also there is one bigger and bold move by Chinese government, that is they are building up a new constitution and law commission, which is mainly dealing with constitutionality reviews of the current laws and regulations. That they can say that this law, even if it is law and please where the people are doing things according to this law, it is unconstitutional and it should be abolished. And what you are doing might be right and might be wrong.
Probably that's the Chinese equivalent of the Constitution Court in France.
I think there's something like that, but we need to listen to the official interpretation of that. Actually, when we were doing field reports with the political advisors and the NPC deputies, they are already raising a lot of concerns and raising a lot of proposals, saying that the current laws and regulations are not constitutional. For example, one political advisor from Guangdong was raising a proposal to abolish the so-called custody and education system for the punishment of prostitution crimes in China, because so far at the moment, if either a prostitute or a client, once caught by the police, they will be put into this so-called custody and education for at least half a year, which is basically about confining their freedom and teaching them the so-called moral lessons every day. And this political advisor says, according to Chinese constitution, no citizen should be put into jail or be confined by personal freedom without a proper trial in a court. But so far, this system has no trial and is confining people's freedom for such a long time. And to believe that this
is an issue about human rights, indeed.
Yes, and about constitution.
Yeah.
The other entertaining story, I'm afraid, is the blue-red battle. In Chinese, 红蓝决斗. I mean, this is a tabloid version, but it's indeed very entertaining, and it is somehow stole the spotlight of the State Council institutional reform.
Yes.
What can you tell us about this? Are you a fan of any of those?
Of course, I'm wearing red today, but I take the side of the blue. The blue, yeah, the blue reporter actually.
Why?
I'm familiar with her, but actually it's not because of that. I think reporters are gonna ask questions more directly. Yeah, save time, save your time, and save the members' time or the people you're gonna interview. Because usually when we speak to members, we only ask the 3 questions. First one is, what's your proposal? The second, why? The third one is, how? Gonna solve that. So, brief is the basic requirement of a reporter to ask a question.
Of a professional correspondent working in the field, right? And actually, this is basically about a female reporter doing something like a filibuster speech, about asking a question for about 2 minutes, and then that lady in blue was rolling her eyeballs to this lady in red. And I think that it's actually a wake-up call for reporters like us to be more professional and to raise questions to the point. And also, it's also a wake-up call for people taking part in the NPC or the CPPCC, because at the moment I feel that still some people are they regard this attendance and
as an honor,
but not a responsibility, which is not right. Both for the political.
In other words, it's very much like the presidential election in the United States. How you look is more important than what you say. Therefore, dress code for the lady in red is more important than the question itself. This is a joke. It's meant to be a serious joke, but it's a wake-up call. You're right. For other reporters in the forefront of the Lianghui coverage, so that they next time will be more professional, to the point, and concise. Thank you so much for being part of this meaningful dialogue. Your first-hand account, an observation of the Lianghui. Thank you so much. When we come back, we'll be joined by Michele Geraci and Victor Gao-Zhikai to expect them to have more profound comments on what's going on there. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. Now we got a new chairman for the CPPCC, Mr. Wang Yang, a very senior politician who's head of the poverty alleviation group in the State Council and also was party secretary of the Chongqing Municipal Committee as well as the provincial municipal committee, the provincial committee of Guangdong. So he's a lot of the jobs. He did the job very well. What do you think of his performance as chairman of the CPPCC?
Well, he was elected, and today he chaired the opening ceremony and gave a closing ceremony and gave a very good closing speech. And I think the expectation is that he will do a good job because he has all the qualifications necessary for this job to run the CPPCC.
So what do you make of his charisma and leadership?
I think he's very humorous, and also he's very down-to-earth, a pragmatic leader, a leader who knows the ins and outs on the ground in the situation, not only in major provinces like Chongqing and Guangdong, but also taking care of the industrial and agricultural portfolio, for example. He probably knows the realities in China very well. One thing may underscore the importance of Wang Yang, Vice Premier. A couple of years back, he was sent to the United States as a special envoy of the Chinese government to clarify that China will not challenge the American leadership, and China will not undermine or replace the current world political and economic order. The United States has been pretty skeptical about what China really wants as a rising economic power. So he's trusted by the Chinese leadership, and he represents Chinese government to clarify the strategic intent. So what do you make of the importance of having Mr. Wang Yang as the head of the top political advisory body?
I think a very good choice and very much consistent with what you mentioned, very interesting, the trip to the United States to ensure that China is not going to try to take the role as a worldwide power from the United States. Combined with what we just said, that he's going to focus also because of his experience on poverty alleviation. These two messages are two faces of the same thing, which is China and Chinese leadership worry, and they should, about domestic issue most. For the Chinese leadership and for the average Chinese person, it is more important to lift out of poverty the remaining 43 million people after the great success of the 800 million lifted over the last 40 years, rather than trying to be an international power. So the fact that he went to the US to reassure the state, don't worry, you keep on doing your international policy. We have more important and more urgent things to worry about, because we have to take care about 1.3 billion people that still have not reached the the generally wealthy society. GDP is very low in China, and so the focus is, as it should be, domestic. And I think it's a good choice that he has this experience in the southwest of China, Guangdong, Chongqing, and on poverty issues. Perfect.
Chinese politics is very interesting. Our political institutions are very different from the Western parliamentary politics, multi-party democracy. Look at the results of the elections in Italy. We won't bring back Silvio Berlusconi over and over to the spotlight, to the center stage, but we have our own way of performing the duty of a lawmaker, for example. So what do you make of the consultative multi-party democracy in our country, in sharp contrast with European democracy like that you have in Italy?
We have in Italy. I was on Italian media, of course, the last few days, because this has been a very surprising result. Well, surprising for those who didn't want to hear the message coming from the bottom. 50% of the people in Italy voted for the so-called populist party, 50. So this is a major change in the European dynamics.
And this newly elected guy comes from nowhere. He's been in obscurity for a long time, yet he's going to be the prime minister in the next government.
We don't know who's the prime minister, but it's going to be either. There are two main parties in Italy that share this 50%, and their rhetoric and also has changed over the last 2-3 years, from Brexit until now, the last 2 years. It's not anymore Europe first, but Italian first, France first, even Macron.
But Chinese politics. So what do you think of our...
the system works...
What is different about our politics?
The difference is that in Europe, the leaders are chosen before, and then they are entrusted with doing the right things, and if not, people do not vote them anymore. In China, of course, people do not vote, but the leadership is chosen by the party, and I think in a way this works much better, because the leadership is then, they must deliver. so that at the end of the term of the 5 years, they can continue to be leaders. So in a way, what I call it, China is not a electoral democracy, but it's ex post democracy, in that the leaders are not chosen, but the leaders do the benefit of the people, and the results speak for themselves.
It might be a very clumsy comparison, but ever since 1945 in Japanese politics, it's the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, that dominates the politics, the center stage. It is a democracy to a large degree. However, it's almost a one-party politics in Japan. Now, China, we have the absolute and unconditional leadership of the CPC, but we have the multi-party cooperation to have the political consultation and the democratic oversight. What's the relationship, working relationship between the ruling party of the CPC and the political forces that we have in the CPPCC?
Yeah. First of all, I think every country is different, and every political system for every country is a little bit different. In China, we have a very unique political system with strong Chinese characteristics. For CPPCC, it is not a part of the parliament. It is not a decision-making body. It is more or less an advisory body. It provides the government and the ruling party with lots of proposals. On average, every year, the CPPCC National Committee members will submit 5,000 to 6,000 proposals. On average, 2 proposals per member. And their proposals will be screened and analyzed, and their good items, for example, will be referred to different government entities for consideration, for more consultation, and eventually for acceptance as a decision for the government. Now, CPPCC works very closely under the overall leadership of the CPC, which is the Communist Party of China, the ruling party of China, and this ensures the consistency of the overall direction for the country. In China, we not only have the Communist Party of China, we have 8 democratic parties, and we have the grouping called People Without Political Affiliation, and also there is a big General Chamber of Commerce, including all the major private-owned enterprises, for example. Every one of them is encouraged to participate in democracy, and every one of them, including their members chosen for CPPCC, are encouraged to think hard, to explore, to come up with creative ideas to propose for the government to consider.
Michele, what do you make of the Chinese politics in that these members of the CPPCC are meant to be in the same boat with the ruling party instead of rocking the boat?
Well, they are advisory body, like we were just saying, so they do not make decision. It's fine, and you heard before, you mentioned that some of the members are stars, rock stars,
movie stars,
basketball players, and so on.
Pop culture.
And in a way, I think this plays a double role. One, it kind of it's a linkage to the people, because people associate themselves much more closely with a movie star, maybe than someone who is not very well known, and so that provides a link, and people really find in that person a representation of their own desires, and so that helps link the party with the people. This is very good, and of course they are expert in their own field, because you know, Chinese society, like any country, but Chinese particularly, is very complex. It's an intricate connection of reforms, supply-side reforms. We talked many times: GDP, poverty, urbanizations, financial system, debt, government, you know, everything, tariffs, investment, and we need to have a nice representation of people who are expert in different areas. No one single person can know everything about it, and so the role of the CPPCC, I think, is paramount, and something that we do have in some countries. For example, in Germany, there are like think tanks. Each of them is associated with a specific political party, so there is a CDU think tanks and so on. We do not have the same things in other countries, and in a way, the Chinese system is very similar to that of the German system, in that the consultative body tries to gather the voices from the people, the needs, and I have to say, this is what I was telling the other day to my Italian colleagues. The great difference between the Chinese political and some of the European is that Chinese policymakers delivers on the promises. My job as an economist is very easy. If China says 6.9% GDP, it will be 6.9% GDP. If they say we're going to lift out of poverty 43 million people, targeted poverty in 7 points, it will be done. If he says by 2025 there will be 35 million electric cars with the production of 7 million per year, it will be done. So we don't have to forecast, we need to analyze, and the job is in a way easier from the point of view of doing the individual forecast, but much more complex because we need to connect all the dots. And this is because leaders do spend 30 years before they reach the top. They don't come out of nowhere. They are like a company. You start from the bottom, maybe from university, school leaders, and then you move up in this jumping between this SOE.
Gentlemen, this year witnesses the 40th anniversary of China's opening up and reform. We are entering into the deep water of reform. It means very subtle. It means to reallocate interests of the interest groups one way or another, and that means a painful evolution of politics and economics. Having said this, you are JD from Yale University, and you know, of course, what the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution actually means. It's the Bill of Rights, and so therefore liberals in China, who have been silent since the 18th National Congress of CPPCC, are very critical of the Constitution Amendment. They say we need to deliver a different voice, we need to strengthen the supervision, we need to do whatever to copy the Western political institutions. But China says, hey, come on, we should work our own way and we should navigate our own course independently. What do you think of the division of the public opinions?
Now, first of all, as a general point, I think China can learn from every country in the world, and we can find many good things in many of these countries that can benefit us. However, there is no single blueprint which can work for China from any other country in the world. The problems we are faced with are very complex, very arduous, and I would say the population, for example, in China is larger than the OECD countries' populations combined together. Can you believe that? So for any leader of any country in the world to come to China, try to become an effective leader, I don't think he or she will be up to the job. So for China, we need to learn from foreign countries, but we need to add the Chinese characteristics to that. Eventually, it will be a very domestically oriented blueprint for China itself.
We tend to use the phrase, the catchphrase of Chinese characteristics to justify something that is neither very Asian nor very American or European. But then we come under fire. For example, a European viewer of our program complains, look, Yang Rui, with the rapid expansion of the Chinese economy, you are becoming less and less attractive. Because you have the Chinese characteristics which are not like us. You are not one of us. Therefore, you are not very popular with Europeans and Americans. I mean, do you think Chinese are ready for the unpopularity, so to speak?
No, I think China needs to make itself better understood by foreign countries, by people in other countries. China is different. China is unique. However, it doesn't mean that we don't have common languages with each other. The key challenge for China is to keep doing the right thing at home, but always eager to make ourselves better understood by our friends in other countries.
Well, is it easy to understand China? Because I put myself into the shoes of a Western observer. Should we first of all understand the Confucianism or communism? Which one comes across as the mainstream ideology? Because in overseas market you have hundreds of schools of Confucianism, sure. But in China, Confucianism is far remote second after communism, the official ideology. Which one represents Chinese culture?
Well, communism,
are they in conflict?
We know communism well because it started from Europe, and then of course, and so this is part of our, in a way, heritage. We tried it, and then China made it its own basis of economic and political system with Chinese characteristics. And so we have here in China elements that are not part of the original maxim. You know, we have private property, we don't have free healthcare, we don't have free education, and so there are things that are mixed between capitalism and communism. You know, my honest view is that we look at the results with a 8–9% GDP growth for 40 years, poverty alleviation. The things that I always repeat until people get bored of hearing me. When you take out of poverty...
Look, Michele, you don't sound like a very European or Western, because a critical Western thinker would always, or a journalist, would always keep their eyes on the procedure justice. But you've got to follow the parliamentary hearings, the court hearings, policy hearings before making up your mind or formulating a final decision.
But that's
this is what happens in the West.
And that's why we fail.
But in China, we rule by decree. And that's why we execute effectively.
Exactly. China has a speed of execution which is faster. Of course, along the way, there may be
JD
decisions.
from Yale, what do you make of the very critical observation from the West about the way jobs are done in China?
No, I think if you allow me to use a similar line from Deng Xiaoping basically said, if socialism produces poverty, it's not a good ideology. Socialism has to produce wealth. The key is how can we make sure that socialism will be productive, will be efficient, and then eventually he found a solution. In China too, when we look at European countries like Italy, I personally look at Italy with a great deal of respect. I know the situation in Italy is different from China. They have their own political system, we have our own political system. We call our system democracy with Chinese characteristics. It is democratic by Chinese standard, but it's also efficient. So I emphasize democracy as well as efficiency. To paraphrase Deng Xiaoping's phrase, if you have democracy without efficiency, maybe that's not good enough democracy. You need to improve on the efficiency part of the democracy. No one in the world should say, I'm a democracy, but efficiency-wise, I'm ranking very low.
When we look at the dynamics and the sustainability of the Chinese economy in the foreseeable future, one thing that gets in the way, I'm afraid, is whether you have the free and equal access to Google, Facebook, Twitter. But a lot of the overseas multinationals complain, hey, come on, we find it difficult to get free access. So therefore, the freedom of speech is prioritized for some of those guys who want to do business here in China, because they just want to do business quickly, more efficiently. Do you think those Europeans should look at our national conditions more carefully and get prepared for something that is not very Western?
But you know, the foreigners that live here in China, now I don't know exact number, but they represent a very, very small percentage. So their voices are a little bit like CPPC, a consultative power, but they do not represent not even 0.1% of the population of China. So insofar as they suggest interesting idea, fine, but the interest of foreigners, if it conflicts with the interest of the local population or not.
Sadly, their perceptions about China have been shaped by the overseas media coverage, which is very negative.
Because they don't come here. Because they don't come here to see the development.
Because of the misunderstanding that has been caused for some of the policy executions. But this is a heavy topic. Some of the loaded concepts are discussed here. It takes time for our overseas friends to develop a better understanding about a culture that spans thousands of years, and it's really very Chinese. Well, I'll hold more of such discussions with you. Until next time, goodbye.